Why do you think they left her there to die? The sun wasn't even up yet. The corridor that had been marked safe on every NATO map was now a graveyard of burning metal and screaming voices. Sector Bravo 4 had turned into hell in under 3 minutes. Mortar fire fell in slow, arcing pulses. Each one made the valley shake, made hearts stutter, made men pray in languages they'd forgotten they knew. The air was thick, pulverized stone, burning oil, blood, panic. Petty Officer First Class Mara Keating staggered down the incline with her hand pressed hard against her side. Blood ran freely between her fingers. A jagged line of shrapnel had torn through her lower abdomen and thigh. Her left leg dragged with every step. But her right arm held fast to the unconscious body of a private. She'd pulled from the burning wreckage of a Stryker vehicle 20 meters up the ridge. She hadn't looked at his name tape. There hadn't been time. Up ahead, the triage point was chaos. Stretchers laid out on canvas tarps. Medics sprinting between the wounded, trying to decide who lived and who didn't with nothing but glances and gut instincts. There were no protocols here, just blood, noise, and not enough hands. Mara stumbled toward them, her boots slipping in ash and gravel. 2 medics broke off and ran toward her. They didn't help her. They peeled the private off her shoulders and rushed him to a line of stretchers without so much as looking her in the eye. She stood there swaying. Blood soaked through her camel blouse. Her breathing was ragged. One of the medics glanced back. She's standing, not critical. Another muttered, we can't waste supplies on every injured woman who tags along. Someone else barked, we've got real fighters to treat. Move her out of the lane. Nobody asked who she was. Nobody saw the battered trauma kit clipped to her belt. Nobody noticed the gold trident patch barely visible under the mud and blood smeared across her uniform. They just saw a bleeding woman and assumed she didn't belong. Mara tried to speak. The words caught in her throat, and then her knees buckled. She collapsed beside a blown-out Humvee, her hands clutching her stomach, her vision blurred at the edges. The medics had already turned away. Dust blew over her as a Blackhawk lifted off with a roar. No one looked back. On the ground, a single dog tag caught the morning light as it slid from her collar, dragging a thin chain across her chest. The blood had cleared just enough to reveal what none of them had seen, an old, faint trident scar inked just above her heart. But by then, there was no one left to notice. The gravel bit into her shoulder as she rolled onto her side, blinking against the glare of smoke-washed sunrise. Her fingers dug into the ground instinctively, searching for leverage, something solid, anything to pull against. Every movement sent a wave of heat through her body that blurred the edges of her vision. She managed to get one knee under her, then the other. Her abdomen screamed. Blood pulsed beneath the pressure of her elbow. Still, she crawled forward. The edge of the triage zone was 30 feet away. She made it 10. Boots stopped in front of her face. "Ma'am," a voice said sharply, "you can't be here." She lifted her head. A young army medic, barely 20 probably, stared down at her like she was in the way, which technically she was. She tried to speak but coughed instead, tasting iron. "You're conscious," he added flatly. "That means you're not priority." She opened her mouth again. Another voice cut her off. "She's not critical, she's talking." A second medic stepped in behind the first, gesturing impatiently. "Clear the evac lane. Move her behind the vehicle. We've got inbound litters coming now." She rasped. "Yeah," the younger one muttered. "We all need something." Together, they half-dragged, half-rolled her behind the burned-out husk of an MRAP and left her in the dirt. She tried to call after them. Her voice cracked into nothing. They were already gone. She lay there, the shadows of boots and stretchers moving past in waves. A colonel barked orders. A Marine shouted for more tourniquets. Somewhere across the valley, gunfire started again. Short bursts, controlled, then cut off. Mara forced herself to sit up. Her blouse clung to her side. She peeled it back just enough to see blood pooling again. The field dressing she'd pressed in had failed. She needed a second tourniquet, fluid resupply, antibiotics, if she wanted to stay conscious through the next hour. From the other side of the vehicle, she heard the logistics captain's voice. "Save the good kits for the guys who will actually get back in the fight." "Copy that. She'll probably pass out soon anyway." She leaned her head back against the warm metal. Dust from the rotor wash of the next chopper rained down in a gray curtain. Stretchers loaded, screams quieted, and then the final rotors pulled up into the haze and vanished. They'd evacuated everyone. Except her. Silence fell like a second detonation. No more boots, no more stretchers, no more war-cracked voices in her ear. Just the sound of blood dripping onto stone. And Mara's own voice, barely above a whisper. "I'm not done. What would you do if no one was coming to save you?" The silence didn't last. Distant artillery rumbled against the ridge like a slow-rolling storm, shaking tiny avalanches of dust loose from the MRAP beside her. Mara blinked hard, forcing her eyes to refocus. She had maybe an hour of lucidity left, less if the bleeding didn't slow. No medics were coming, no evac, no backup. So she did what Navy SEALs do when nobody else shows up. She treated herself. With a grunt, she pushed to her elbows and scanned the kill zone. Smoke drifted over abandoned gear, blown open packs, and the dark silhouettes of vehicles cooked by the first mortars. Closer, 10 feet maybe, was a green medical ruck lying half-buried under debris. She dragged herself toward it on her forearms, teeth clenched, legs screaming every time they brushed the ground. When she finally reached the pack and flipped it open, she exhaled shakily. Quick clot tourniquet, airway kit, IV bags. Not much, but enough. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned her blouse and peeled back the blood-soaked fabric. The wound was ugly. Shrapnel lodged deep beside her navel, the flesh around it slick and pulsing. She didn't have the luxury of hesitation. She scavenged a metal pry tool from the torn ruck frame and held it over a small patch of burning debris until it glowed faintly. Then, jaw locked, breath held, she pressed it beside the wound and used her other hand to work the shrapnel free. White pain detonated across her vision. She bit down on her sleeve and screamed into the dirt to keep from blacking out. The fragment slid free in a ribbon of blood. She tossed it aside, grabbed the quick clot, and packed the wound with brutal efficiency learned across too many deployments. Her fingers were slick, her breathing went uneven, but she kept moving. Tourniquet next, tightened high on the thigh to slow the secondary bleed. She hissed as it cinched down. Then she tore open an IV bag with her teeth, stabbed the needle into her own arm, and taped it in place with hands that kept wanting to go numb. Only once the fluid started to drip did she let herself rest her head against the rock. For 30 seconds, maybe less, she closed her eyes. And then she heard it. Voices not far, not friendly. Her eyes snapped open. She reached for her sidearm, checked the mag, half full. She had one rifle magazine left in her vest. That was it. The voices grew louder, boots on gravel, at least 3, maybe 4. They were speaking a dialect she recognized, local militia, but their movements were too coordinated, too practiced. These weren't farmers with AKs. These were contractors. Someone had sold the convoy route. Mara pulled herself into a crouch behind the MRAP, breathing through the pain. She keyed her radio with trembling fingers. "Convoy actual, this is Keating. How copy?" Static, then a voice, distant and distorted. "Keating, we thought you were evac'd." "Negative, still at the triage site. I've got movement. 4 hostiles inbound, maybe more." A pause. Then the logistics captain's voice came through, tight with disbelief. "Keating, you're wounded. Fall back. We'll send a QRF when we can." She looked down at the blood-soaked bandage on her side, at the IV bag dangling from her arm. "There's no time for that," she said quietly. "They're already here." "Then hide, stay low, don't engage." She didn't answer, just clicked the radio off. Because hiding wasn't an option. Not when the convoy she'd saved was 15 kilometers down the road, moving slow, vulnerable, with wounded on board. If these contractors were here, more were waiting ahead. She checked her rifle, racked the bolt, steadied her breathing. And then she moved. Not away from the threat. Toward it. The first one never saw her coming. He stepped around the corner of the MRAP, weapon low, scanning for survivors. She put 2 rounds center mass before he could raise his barrel. The second spun at the sound. She dropped behind cover as rounds sparked off the vehicle frame above her head. Her side screamed, her vision wavered, but her hand stayed steady. She waited, counted his shots, 7, 8, 9. Then silence. He was reloading. She rolled out, fired twice. He went down hard. 2 down, at least 2 more. But now they knew she was armed, trained, dangerous. Now they'd be careful. Mara pulled the IV from her arm, left the bag where it fell, and moved low through the wreckage. She had one advantage. She knew this ground. She'd crawled every meter of it. And she wasn't trying to escape. She was hunting. Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you? The third one made the mistake of calling out to his partner, short, clipped, overconfident. Mara tracked the sound, circled wide, and found him crouched behind a blown tire, scanning the wrong direction. One shot clean, he slumped forward without a sound. 3 down. But the fourth was smart. He didn't move, didn't call out, just waited. Mara pressed her back against a shattered vehicle frame and forced herself to breathe. Her side was on fire. The tourniquet was holding, but barely. She could feel warm blood seeping down her leg again. She keyed her radio one more time. "Convoy actual, hostiles neutralized, but there's more coming. You need to change your route, now." The captain's voice came back, shaken. "Keating, how many were there?" "Doesn't matter, listen to me. Someone sold your route. This wasn't random. They knew where you'd be when you'd be there. You need to go off-grid, use the northern pass." A long pause. "Copy that, we're rerouting. Keating, are you?" "I'm fine, just move." She wasn't fine, but that didn't matter. What mattered was buying them time. She moved again, slower now, favoring her good leg. The fourth hostile was still out there, patient, disciplined. She respected that, but it wouldn't save him. She found him 10 minutes later, positioned on a low ridge overlooking the triage site. Perfect overwatch. He had a clear shot at the road the convoy would have taken. Would have. Mara climbed the slope on her belly, rifle slung across her back, knife in her hand. Every meter felt like a mile. Her vision kept narrowing at the edges. Her pulse hammered in her ears. But she didn't stop. When she reached the top, she found him prone, scope to his eye, finger resting light on the trigger. She didn't hesitate. The blade went in clean. He gasped once, tried to turn. She held him down until he stopped moving. 4 down. She knelt there for a moment, breathing hard, hands shaking. Then she took his radio, his spare magazines, and his water. And she kept moving. Because there was something else. Something she'd seen in the way they'd moved, the way they'd coordinated. This wasn't a random ambush. This was an execution. And the convoy was still in danger. She limped down the ridge, every step a negotiation with her body. The rifle felt heavier than it should. The world tilted slightly left. She ignored it. At the base of the slope, she found what she was looking for. A second team. 6 more contractors, setting up a roadblock exactly where the convoy would have been if she hadn't called it in. They were calm, efficient, checking weapons, testing comms. Waiting. Mara crouched in the shadow of a boulder and assessed. 6 targets. She had maybe 2 magazines left. No backup, no air support, no backup plan. Just her. And the mission. She keyed the stolen radio, switching to their frequency. Listened. ETA 15 minutes. No contact yet. Copy, hold position. Let them pass the choke point, then light them up. Her jaw tightened. She pulled a fragmentation grenade from her vest. 1 left. She'd been saving it. Not anymore. She pulled the pin, counted to 2, and hurled it into the center of their position. The blast was deafening. Dust and debris erupted. Screams followed. She didn't wait to see the damage. Just moved left, fast as her body would allow, and opened fire. 2 went down in the chaos. A 3rd spun, trying to locate her. She dropped him mid-turn. 3 left. They scattered, smart, disciplined. But panicked. She used that. Moved again, flanked right. Caught 1 reloading behind a rock, put him down. 2 left. Her rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, drew her sidearm, and kept moving. The 5th one rushed her position, firing wild. She stayed low, let him burn through his magazine, then rose and put 2 rounds in his chest. 1 left. The last one didn't run, didn't panic. He stepped out into the open, weapon raised, and looked right at her. "You're the one they left behind," he said, calm, almost curious. She didn't answer, just raised her sidearm. He smiled. "You should have stayed down." "So should you." She fired first. He dropped. Silence. Mara stood there, swaying, sidearm still raised. Smoke drifted across the road. Bodies lay scattered in the dust. 10 hostiles, all down. And she was still standing. Barely. She keyed her radio, her own frequency this time. "Convoy actual, roads clear, you're good to move." The captain's voice came back, tight with something that sounded like awe. "Keating, what did you do?" She looked at the carnage around her, at the blood soaking through her uniform, at the empty magazines scattered at her feet. "My job," she said quietly. And then her knees gave out. "Do you know what it feels like to be invisible until you bleed?" She woke to the sound of rotors. Not close, distant, but getting closer. Mara blinked against the glare of the sun, now fully risen, harsh and unforgiving. She was lying on her side in the dirt. Her sidearm was still in her hand. How long had she been out? Minutes, hours. She forced herself to sit up. The world tilted violently. She swallowed down the nausea and checked her wound. Still bleeding, slower now but steady. The tourniquet had bought her time, but not much. She reached for her radio, keyed it. "Convoy actual." Her voice came out as a rasp. She tried again. "Convoy actual, this is Keating. How copy?" Static, then a voice, not the captain, one of the medics. "Keating, Jesus, where are you?" "Still at the roadblock. I need evac." "We're 20 kilometers out. We can't turn back. There's still hostile activity in the area." She closed her eyes. Of course there was. "Understood," she said. "Keep moving. I'll figure it out." "Keating, wait." She clicked off the radio. Because there was nothing more to say. She was alone again. She looked around. The bodies of the contractors lay where they'd fallen. One of them had a sat phone clipped to his vest. She crawled over, unclipped it, and powered it on. It took 3 tries to get a signal. When it finally connected, she dialed the emergency frequency for coalition forces. A voice answered, professional, detached. "Identify." "Petty Officer First Class Mara Keating, Navy SEAL. I'm wounded and stranded at grid." She rattled off the coordinates from memory. A pause. "Say again your rank and unit." "Petty Officer First Class, SEAL Team 3. Another pause, longer this time. "Ma'am, we have no record of a SEAL asset in this sector." She almost laughed. Of course they didn't. Because she wasn't supposed to be here. She'd been attached to the convoy as a medic, a courtesy assignment, a way to rotate SEALs through low-threat zones to give them a break from the hard missions. Nobody knew. Nobody had asked. "I'm here," she said flatly, "and I need a vac. Stand by." The line went quiet. Mara leaned back against a rock, phone still pressed to her ear, and waited. The rotors were getting louder now, closer. But they weren't coming for her. She watched as two Apache screamed overhead, heading north, toward the convoy, providing air cover. Good. At least they were safe. The sat phone crackled. The voice returned. "Keating, we're showing your last known position as evacuated 6 hours ago. Are you sure you're at the correct grid?" She looked down at the blood pooling beneath her, at the bodies scattered around her, at the rifle lying just out of reach. "Yeah," she said quietly, "I'm sure." "Copy, we'll dispatch a recovery team. ETA 90 minutes. 90 minutes. She clicked off the phone and set it down beside her. 90 minutes, she could do that. Probably. She closed her eyes and focused on breathing. In, out, slow, steady. Don't think about the pain. Don't think about the blood. Don't think about the medics who'd left her to die. Just breathe. A sound pulled her back, boots on gravel. Her eyes snapped open. Her hand went to her sidearm. But the figure approaching wasn't hostile. It was the young medic, the one who dragged her behind the MRAP. He stopped 10 feet away, staring at her, at the bodies, at the blood. "You," he started, then stopped. She didn't say anything, just watched him. He took a step closer, saw the trident patch on her vest, the one that was visible now with the blood and mud washed away by sweat. His face went pale. "You're a SEAL," she finished. "Yeah." He looked around again, at the contractors, at the weapons, at the devastation. "You did this alone." She didn't answer, didn't need to. He knelt down slowly, setting his med kit on the ground. "I'm sorry," he said, voice shaking. "We didn't know, we should have." "You should have asked," she said, not angry, just tired. He nodded, opened the kit, started pulling out supplies. "Let me help you." She almost refused, almost told him she didn't need his help. But her body was shutting down, and pride wasn't worth dying for. "Okay," she said quietly. He worked quickly, professionally, replaced her tourniquet, packed the wound properly, started an IV. His hands didn't shake. When he was done, he sat back and looked at her. "The convoy's safe," he said, "because of you." She didn't respond. He stood, keyed his radio. "This is Corpsman Hayes. I've got a SEAL down at the roadblock. She needs immediate evac, priority 1. A voice crackled back, the logistics captain. "Hayes, what are you talking about? There are no SEALs." "Sir," Hayes interrupted, "I'm looking at her trident right now. She's been holding the line solo for the last 6 hours, and she's the reason we're all still alive." Silence. Then the captain's voice came back, quiet. "Understood, we're inbound, 10 minutes. Hayes looked down at Mara. "They're coming," he said. She nodded. He hesitated, then spoke again. "For what it's worth, I won't forget this, what you did, what we almost." "It's fine," she said, and meant it. Because holding grudges took energy she didn't have. The rotors grew louder, dust began to swirl. And for the first time in hours, Mara let herself believe she might actually make it out. How do you forgive the people who didn't see you until it was almost too late? The Black Hawk landed in a storm of dust and noise. The side door slid open before the skids even touched down. This time they didn't hesitate. 2 medics jumped out, sprinting toward her with a stretcher. The logistics captain followed close behind, helmet in hand, face drawn tight. Hayes stepped back as they reached her. One medic knelt, assessing her wounds with quick, practiced hands. The other prepped the stretcher. The captain stopped a few feet away, staring. "Keating," he said, voice rough. She looked up at him, didn't speak. "We didn't know," he said, "if we'd known." "You didn't ask," she said, flat, matter of fact. He flinched, nodded once. No excuses, no defense. The medics lifted her onto the stretcher. She hissed as they moved her, pain lancing through her side. "Easy," one of them murmured. "We've got you now." "Now." She closed her eyes as they carried her toward the helo. The rotor wash was deafening. Dust stung her face. They loaded her in, strapped her down. One medic stayed with her, checking vitals, adjusting the IV. The captain climbed in last, sat across from her as the bird lifted off. He didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at her, at the blood-soaked uniform, at the trident on her vest. Finally, he leaned forward. "You saved 23 lives today," he said, "including mine." She turned her head to look at him. "I saved 24, she said quietly. "The private, at the beginning, before you left me." His jaw tightened, he nodded. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded like he meant it. She didn't answer, just looked out the open door at the landscape rushing past below. The medic beside her spoke up. "Ma'am, can you tell me your pain level, 1 to 10? 8, she lied. It was closer to 11. He adjusted something on the IV. Within seconds, warmth spread through her veins. The edges of the pain softened. She let her head fall back against the stretcher. The flight was short, 15 minutes maybe. They landed at a forward operating base she didn't recognize. More medics waiting, a surgeon in scrubs. They transferred her to a gurney and wheeled her fast toward a medical tent. The world blurred, voices overlapped. Gunshot wounds. Negative shrapnel, self-treated. Jesus, how long ago? 6, maybe 7 hours. She's been walking around for 7 hours with this. Not walking, fighting. Someone swore softly. They wheeled her into surgery. Bright lights, cold air, hands everywhere cutting away her uniform, prepping her skin. A face appeared above her. The surgeon, older, calm eyes. "Petty Officer Keating," he said. "I'm Dr. Brennan. We're going to take care of you now, but I need you to stay with me. Can you do that?" She nodded. "Good, count backward from 10. 10, 9, 8. The world went dark. When she woke, the pain was different, duller, distant. She was in a recovery tent, clean sheets, soft light filtering through canvas. An IV ran into her arm. Monitors beeped softly beside her. She turned her head slowly, saw Hayes sitting in a chair by her bed, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when she moved. "Hey," he said, smiled slightly. "Welcome back." Her throat was dry. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. He reached for a cup of water, held the straw to her lips. She drank, slow. "How long?" she managed. 2 days, he said. "They had to go back in once, remove some shrapnel they missed, but you're stable now." 2 days. She closed her eyes. "The convoy," she asked. "Made it through, everyone, because of the route change you called in." "Good." "The private." "He's here, same base, asking about you every day." She exhaled slowly. Hayes set the cup down, hesitated. "There's something else," he said. She opened her eyes. "They recovered the sat phone you used, the one from the contractor." She waited. It had encrypted intel on it. Names, payouts, proof that someone inside Coalition Command sold the convoy route. Her jaw tightened. "They're investigating now," Hayes continued, "but they want to talk to you when you're ready." She nodded. He stood, moved toward the tent flap, then stopped. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I told everyone what you did, how we almost." He trailed off. "It's okay," she said. He shook his head. No, it's not, but I won't forget it. None of us will. He left. Mara lay there, staring at the canvas ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the base. Generators humming, voices calling, helicopters coming and going. She was alive. The convoy was safe. And the people who'd left her to die now knew exactly who she was. But it didn't feel like victory. It just felt heavy. Because she'd proven herself, again. And she hated that she'd had to. What does it cost to be the person no one believes in until you bleed? 3 weeks later, Mara stood in a briefing room at Camp Leatherneck, wearing a clean uniform and a brace around her midsection. The wound was healing, slowly. The doctors said she'd been lucky. Another hour without treatment and she wouldn't have made it. Lucky. She didn't feel lucky. The room filled up around her. Officers, senior enlisted, the logistics captain, Hayes, even the private she'd carried, walking now with a limp but alive. They'd called it a debrief, but it felt more like a reckoning. A colonel stepped to the front of the room. Silver hair, hard eyes, she didn't recognize him. Petty Officer Keating, he said. On behalf of Coalition Command, I want to personally thank you for your actions during the ambush on Sector Bravo 4. She nodded, said nothing. Your intervention saved 24 personnel and prevented a catastrophic loss of a critical convoy. He paused, looked down at a folder in his hands. We've also completed our investigation into the intelligence breach. The encrypted data you recovered led us to a contractor embedded within our logistics chain. He's been detained, along with 3 others. Good. However, the colonel continued, there's another matter we need to address. He looked directly at her. You were attached to that convoy as a medical advisor, not a combat operator. You were never authorized to engage hostiles, and yet you killed 10 enemy combatants in direct violation of your orders. The room went silent. Mara met his gaze, steady. With respect, sir, she said, I didn't have orders, I had a choice. Let the convoy die or stop it. You weren't supposed to be in that fight. Neither were the people shooting at us. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. What you did was reckless, unsanctioned, and if it had gone wrong, it would have been your court-martial. Yes, sir. He held her gaze for another long moment, then nodded. It's also the reason 24 people are alive, so I'm not going to bury you in paperwork, but I am going to make sure this never happens again. He opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned. Back to SEAL Team 3, full combat rotation. No more medical advisor detachments, no more low-threat assignments. He set the paper down on the table in front of her. You're a SEAL, Keating, so we're putting you back where you belong. She looked down at the orders, then back up at him. Thank you, sir. He nodded once, then addressed the room. Dismissed. Everyone stood, filed out slowly. A few people nodded to her as they passed. The private stopped, held out his hand. Thank you, he said simply. She shook it. Any time. Hayes was the last to leave. He paused at the door. You going to be okay? He asked. She thought about it, about the medics who'd ignored her, the captain who'd dismissed her, the hours she'd spent bleeding in the dirt, alone, fighting a war no one thought she belonged in. About the fact that she'd had to prove herself, again. Yeah, she said, I'll be fine. He nodded and left. Mara stood alone in the briefing room for a moment. Then she picked up the reassignment orders, folded them carefully, and walked out into the bright Afghan sun. She didn't feel vindicated. Didn't feel proud. Just tired. Because she'd learned something in that valley. Something she'd always known but had hoped wasn't true. That some people would never see her until she bled. That she would always have to fight twice as hard, prove herself twice as much, and even then it might not be enough. But she also learned something else, that she would do it anyway. Not for them, for the people who couldn't fight for themselves, for the private who needed her, for the convoy that would have died without her, for the mission, because in the end, that's all that mattered. Not the recognition, not the respect, not even the vindication. Just the mission, and the promise she'd made a long time ago. Leave no one behind, even if they left her. She walked across the compound toward the barracks, her side aching with every step, her mind already turning toward the next deployment, the next mission, the next fight. Because that's what SEALs do. They keep going, no matter what. And sometimes, when the world refuses to see you, the only thing left to do is prove them wrong. Not with words, with action, quietly, competently, without apology. Because dignity doesn't demand to be seen. It simply is. And in the end, that's the only victory that matters.